So let's talk about the subject at hand, AQP for General Aviation. So Dan, you want to kind of give a little, your bit on the background of AQP itself? Sort of the background of this concept, and then I can help talk a little bit about how this applies to GA.
Well, I was born at a really early age. I was born underneath a bridge. No. To my AQP.
Yeah.
Welcome, and appreciate Meredith putting this together. I'm the guest up here, or here at her deal. But the AQP is a concept that I derived from the airlines. I was an instructor at Delta Airlines, and they showed me what AQP was when I started teaching there. My first question was, what's AQP? And then when they started doing check rides, they said, this is what we're going to do on a check ride. I said, no, you're not. You can't do that on a check ride because I have the PTS. I know what the PTS says, and this is what we're doing on a check ride. They said, no, don't worry about the PTS. We're doing this on check rides. And sure enough, they were right. They had AQP, which is FAA's approval, to throw the old check ride book away and only do the scenarios common to our airline that people can get hurt on. So somebody finally woke up and realized that a 747 doesn't need to do a steep turn in recurrent training to maintain proficiency. It doesn't really do anything for us. However, there's some scenarios that a 747 could get themselves into that you need training on. So it became scenario-based training is what it is. So we took that. I fully embraced it. Once I saw what they did, and I saw their new plan and recurrent and initial and everything else, what's actually on the check ride has nothing to do with the stuff that's on the FAA check ride. So that's where the concept came from. Excuse me, hello, Mr. Biden. Yes, sir. I will call you back.
Why would you call me back?
Well, I got some things I'm not real happy about, so I'm going to call for mine. Then I'll put this back. So that's the FAA director. Yeah. That's what the deal is. Does everybody understand that basic philosophy?
Yes.
For general aviation now, we have scenarios. So I started looking at all the ways that us pilots routinely kill ourselves, and I came to the conclusion that we don't really have very many, and we're repeating the same methods of killing ourselves every time. It's one of a laundry list. We're doing it the exact same way. There's nobody going out there and getting creative and killing themselves in a fabulous way. You're just using one of the same ways that the guy before you did. They're all so
No
now,
creativity.
no, there's no creativity. So now it's just a matter of figuring out how we're killing ourselves and defining those and telling people, well, if you got a pilot's license in your pocket and you go fly, this is probably going to happen to you. Here, and this is a scenario. After takeoff, this is going to happen to you. And if you haven't thought about it, this is what's going to happen to you. So that's basically it. And my thanks to Meredith for putting this on. I do have a demonstration that I'm going to do here in just a minute when Meredith gets to you. And it'll show you kind of the core philosophy of what AQP is all about. We'll do that in a minute where we're ready.
Cool. Thanks, Dan. So, so just a 2-second sort of background on me and sort of why I feel this is relevant and why I feel so passionate about sharing this with other GA pilots. Again, I am not at this show selling flight training. My school is backed up 2-3 weeks. If any of you guys said, hey, I want to come to Jacksonville to fly with you because I think AQP is so awesome, I'd say that's great. Come back and call me in July. So we really are not here to sell anything. We just, like Dan, feel really passionate about the concept and want to share it with other folks. So what we have done at our flight school is incorporate this into our syllabus. Now, if you go online and you kind of Google AQP for General Aviation, you're not going to find just me. You're going to find a bunch of the other folks that that I kind of saw first before I found out about all this. There's some other channels. Flight Chops is one of them, and a couple other YouTube channels, including Dan's, where this subject is discussed. And I realized that my husband and I have actually kind of been doing this all along without even giving it a a little stamp, right, of giving it a name. We've kind of embraced these kinds of concepts all along. But I got some additional ideas about how we can incorporate this stuff into our training even more. So what we did is we took one of the source documents that was referenced on Dan's YouTube channel, and I said, hey, can I just get a copy of this so I can cut and paste it and sort of modify it into mine? And they all said, sure, great, that's the whole idea. And I'm now saying, that link that's on that card that I gave you guys, I'm saying, here's the PDF, this file that's on my stick. Take it, cut and paste it. I can send it to you as a text file in whatever format you want if you send me an email, and you guys run with it. Do whatever the heck you want with it and try and incorporate this into your personal flight training program. If you're a flight instructor or you own a flight school, maybe you can find some little nuggets of stuff in here that you can incorporate into your training. I also found a lot of parallels personally with this concept in the training that I did with Cirrus over the last 20 years. I've been to Duluth, I've been to their facility in Knoxville. I've gone through the CSIP training a couple times. I'm not currently active on their list just because I don't own a Cirrus, I don't lease one, so it's not like really a huge part of my business anymore, but I'm familiar enough with the program, to be able to say that a lot of the stuff that they incorporate into their Cirrus standardized training dovetails nicely with a lot of these concepts as well, so it kind of resonated with me in that way. So let me just go through this document and kind of share some of these ideas, and then we'll go around the room and see if anybody can relate. I like this to be fairly conversational, so I apologize when I struggle with someone else's laptop here. Here we go. So this is this document, again, which you can download for free using that link, which I had cut and pasted most of it from other folks, really just talks about the GA fatality rate, and this is what Dan was referring to also, is that, we're constantly doing the same things to get into trouble, so why don't we try and wake ourselves up and maybe, instead of looking at this stuff after the fact and saying, oh man, that's terrible that happens to that person, maybe we can reach people ahead of time so that they can adjust their training and their flight protocols to prevent these things from happening in the future. And I know this is probably it's tiny and I don't know how to make it much bigger, but I'll just read a couple of these things that we've tried to incorporate into our syllabus, the reasons why people are getting into trouble. Little to no awareness of aircraft takeoff and landing performance charts, runway required for takeoff, and runway length available. So, this is basic stuff that's required under Part 91, but you'd be surprised how many pilots come to me that come through our flight school that either have a certificate and want to get checked out to rent, or student pilots that, are going through their pre-solo phase and kind of really struggling with realizing how important knowing that data is, right? What is the performance of my airplane? As part of this, this exercise, we've added a question to our pre-solo knowledge test. So this is for student pilots, right, getting ready for their first solo. We've added a question there that says, a scenario question. You've just departed runway, 32 at Craig. Tell me, at 300 feet AGL in your airplane, because we've got a fleet of 7, different Cessnas from 150s to 172s. So whatever plane you're in, if you're at 300 feet, what's underneath you right then? And if your engine quit right then, where are you going to land this airplane? Valid question, right? It shouldn't be too complicated for a student pilot. This isn't just something, in my opinion, that should be on a flight review, 2-4 years later for the pilot after they've already earned their certificate. When you're a student pilot, whether you've got 10 hours, which is really, really low, right, or 20, 30 hours as a brand new student, you've got to be able to deal with this situation. What I always tell our students is the airplane does not care at all who is sitting in that left seat. It doesn't care if it's a 20-hour student pilot, or me, an instructor with, 6,000 hours, or Dan's probably got 3 times that many hours, or my husband. The airplane doesn't care, right? So whoever's sitting in that seat has to deal with it. So all of these questions are valid, right? And I think a lot of people think, oh, it's just it's just your first solo, it's just a couple of, trips around the pattern, what could go wrong? Well, a lot could go wrong. Dan, do you remember, what was the name of that young woman who landed on the golf course in Georgia? Sierra, right. It wasn't her first solo, but it was like her second solo, I think. So, student pilot, right? The engine quit in the Cessna 150. And I love that photo of her standing next to the airplane on the golf course, kind of like going like this, like, great, sorry. We wrecked the airplane, but she handled it very well. So obviously, always a little bit of luck involved, right? You may have a really crappy landing spot below you, and you gotta just fly it all the way into the crash, right? But if you've got something viable, you should know what those viable spots are and be prepared to go for it. The checklists say, in an engine failure, find a suitable place to land. I always tell my folks, if you just first start looking at the moment that engine starts running rough, you are way behind the airplane, right? You gotta already know where those spots are. And so another question we ask folks is, as you're in the run-up area getting ready to depart, I wanna hear a briefing on the crosswind component. I wanna hear a briefing on how much runway you have available for takeoff, and I wanna hear what is out there, right? What is beyond the departure end of the runway that's a viable landing spot for you? And again, I can't tell you how many people I asked that question to, and they're like, a road? I'm like, wrong answer, water, right? So you just always have to think ahead. And honestly, there's no excuse for that these days. Everybody has at least one GPS on their person at any given time, right? Whether it's your phone or your whatever it is, right? We're all carrying around a million GPSs. How hard is it to just go to the maps function, satellite view? Oh yeah, that's what's out there, right? It takes 2 seconds. So, but a lot of people just don't, put it high enough on their priority list to think it through ahead of time. And that's all we're asking, is for people to just kind of way ahead, kind of calmly prioritize and think through this stuff so that you're better prepared to act, God forbid something should happen. So this talks a little bit about the flight review. We've actually incorporated a syllabus for an IPC at our flight school that incorporates these concepts. So one of the key differences, right, between, by the way, before I go too deep into this, how many student pilots in the room? Any student pilots in the room? One? Constantly, I love it, good answer. But I just mentioned that because a new student pilot may not know yet what a flight review or an IPC is, and I didn't want to kind of talk over anybody's head. But basically, this is recurrent training that's required after you earn your certificate. So an IPC would be an instrument proficiency check. This would be for a pilot who has an instrument rating and then needs to do additional training or practice to maintain those privileges to fly IFR. So we've incorporated a lot of these concepts even into that training. An example that I gave yesterday to the group that was here is, thinking through what are your weather minimums for departure in the airplane that you're flying. And the answer will vary depending on the airplane you're in, right? This is not a one-size-fits-all solution, and that kind of dovetails with the concept that Dan was saying is, the ACS, the regulations are pretty broad brush, right? This is supposed to apply to everybody. Like I tell my student pilots, you are not taking your check ride in November 60254, 1969 Cessna 150. You are, one of my favorite old airplanes, you are earning a certificate for airplane single engine land. So as far as the FAA is concerned, you could go out tomorrow and get yourself a brand new, Cirrus or Skylane, and with your insurance requirements notwithstanding, you could get a couple extra hours with an instructor and off you go, right? Totally different airplane, right? So we have to really consider our operation, our location, our terrain, and our machine when we're thinking through these things, right? So for the IPC, for example, one of the concepts we've incorporated is thinking through what makes sense for you in your airplane at your location, a minimum ceiling for departure. And not to pick on my clients with the Cirrus, but I just think it's a really relevant, valid example for people to think about. So I had a gentleman come in maybe 6 or 7 years ago to do an IPC in an SR-22. And for those of you that don't know about this make and model, it's one of the, kind of their brand theme is that it's got the caps, the parachute that you can pull. And so there's a minimum altitude at which it's recommended that you can deploy this and have it fully functional, right? You could obviously pull the trigger at any time, but it's not gonna work unless you've got enough altitude for it to open and, you know, safely come down. So I asked this gentleman, you know, I said, what's your minimum altitude for departure? And he looks at the thing and he's like, well, you guys have an ILS, 200 feet, so 200 feet is my minimum altitude. I'm like, okay. So you take off into a 200-foot ceiling with, you know, minimums, and your motor starts crapping out at 300 AGL. What are you gonna do? A little bit of quiet, and he says, well, I'm gonna land. Where? Straight ahead. Okay, what's out there? How are you gonna identify that thing? You just departed runway 32. And again, kind of like silence, and I'm like, that's my whole point in asking the question, is you're in the cloud at that point, you don't know exactly what's in front of you, you can't pull the chute, you just gotta hope everything works out, right? Why don't you consider, I told this person, making your minimum ceiling for departure, the caps pull minimum altitude. Because that way you're kind of covered on both sides of the fence. If the motor quits below 600 feet, you maybe can look out the window and try and steer the airplane a little bit more accurately to a safe spot where you could put it down. And if something happens above 600 feet, you pull the chute. That may give you a little more confidence. And I can tell you from personal experience, I have had 2 major engine problems in brand new airplanes. I had a gascolator, the fuel, you know, filter basically, on a brand new Cirrus. The checklist said, turn the fuel pump off. We were departing IFR in this thing out of Gaithersburg, Maryland, at around 3,000 feet going on across country to Atlantic City. It says, turn off the fuel pump. Turn off the fuel pump. That's not good, right? So unfortunately, my mentors have said, never take your finger off that switch when you're switching tanks or messing with the fuel pump, right? So I quickly turned it back on, and all right, well, this isn't good. So we go land at BWI, where fortunately there was a service center. Figured out it was the gascolator was the wrong part. Would have been nice that they installed the correct one. But anyway, that all got fixed. But you know, what if that had happened, you know, down lower, right? I had again a brand new airplane, had just come through annual. So I mean, it wasn't like obviously brand new from the factory that it had a couple hours on it, but not very many. I mean, it wouldn't have even qualified for a 100-hour. The fuel line, one of the fuel lines wasn't torqued on correctly. And so we're flying around Virginia, and I'm like, that fuel flow doesn't look quite right. I don't really smell anything, I don't see anything, but there's like things going off. I'm like, I think we ought to land. So we go ahead and land. I think it was in Manassas or somewhere. They open up that cowling. It was the color of Dan's shirt. Wet everywhere. I was like, how close did I come to being a firecracker? You know? So you can't just say, oh, it's a new airplane, everything is gonna be fine, right? And I've got all this equipment. You still always have to be, you know, spring-loaded to act and make sure that you know what to do in all of these situations. Let's see if I can get this thing to come back on again. Keep track of the time. Okay, there we go. So here we talk about the AQP for solo for student pilots, right? So any flight instructors in the room? Okay, awesome. Anybody work for a flight school as an instructor? You guys independents? Independent instructors, okay. And you said you're a student pilot. Are you working with an independent instructor? Are you at a flight school?
I'm at a flight school.
With multiple staff members that you work with? Okay. And everybody else, I assume, is either an enthusiast or a rated pilot, maybe wanting to fly with you at some point. Okay. So for those of you who are in the student pilot mode, or if you have a friend who's a student pilot, you may want to consider looking through this and maybe adding some of these exercises or scenario questions into your pre-solo training, because like I said, the airplane, doesn't care who you are. So let's talk a little bit about this. This concept of DMMS, defined minimum maneuvering speed. I had never heard this term before until I watched the video that you did, Dan, with, what's the gentleman's name? I think the first one where you talked about this was the gentleman from Flight Chops, the guy from Canada?
Steve.
Is that right, Steve? Yeah. And I found this fascinating, because again, I realized that I've kind of been thinking about this all along and telling people, okay, you don't need to fly this Cessna 150 like in F-15, just, I kind of always joke with people, you want to fly this airplane, fly it like grandma, hold the yoke like your mom would hold grandma's teacup, right? Like really gently, you don't have to do anything crazy with this airplane. To make it do what you need it to do. And so this concept here of DMMS, this is basically giving yourself and your airplane a little bit of a buffer, an extra buffer over the stall speed, so that as you're maneuvering from base to final, you're maneuvering in the traffic pattern, you're not gonna set yourself up for an inadvertent stall spin. Obviously, once you get established on the final approach, you want to be at the slowest, safest speed for the conditions and for your airplane so you don't use up gobs of runway, right? Too much of a good thing isn't good either, right? Because if you're coming screaming in too fast and you don't have enough runway, now we're going to end up with another AQP problem of, an overrun, right? And loss of control during the landing. That's not what we're talking about here. This is just looking at your data, looking at your POH and kind of thinking through your operation and saying, okay, what would be a good safe target speed for me to have as I'm turning, base to final, so that I don't get too slow? Because one of the common, if you look at the NTSB accident reports and you look at, some of these incidents where people have screwed up coming into land, what happens, right? Maybe we have a tailwind on the base leg, there's a crosswind that day, right? So we overshoot the final, and what happens? Oh crap, now we've overshot the final approach, we have to crank this thing back on, and then people start getting uncoordinated. When people get tense, because I'm just speaking from personal experience in my observation of student pilots and other customers, rated pilots that I work with, when they get tense, their whole upper body sort of clenches, right? The death gripping on the yoke. When people are holding tight on the yoke when they get nervous, it's not just a wrist motion, it's like a whole upper body thing, and they tend to pull back. They don't even know they're doing it, but they tend to pull back, right? So whether it's the yoke or the stick, now what's happening is we're inadvertently pulling back because we're getting anxious about what's happening in the airplane, right? We're increasing our angle of attack, not really aware that they're doing it, so this just compounds the problem, right? So we just want people to start thinking through this stuff in advance and being very cognizant of how you're controlling the airplane and the speed that you're flying at, so you can, again, give yourself a little bit more of a buffer in these situations. We have got a bunch of people that came in. Good. I just want to tell you folks, if you're, we've got some information up here at the desks and a raffle at the end, so if you didn't get a ticket or some information, you can come and see me at the end, okay? Let's see, it's 9:30. Dan, do you want to say anything about the DMMS?
Well,
Did I kind of?
yeah, let me count here about 6 minutes here.
Yeah, go for it.
You have the screen that shows all the scenarios, all of them.
Like this? There's not one page with all of them, but I can kind of go through. Can you see it? On the screen right now, there's lots of thrust on takeoff.
No, I was talking about the page that all 20 of them on there.
This?
And I went to the afterwards, so I did bring some hats here, so I brought
this one?
No, all 20 of them. Lost,
Well, my document's a little different than,
okay.
this is basically it though.
Yeah, so the bottom line on NTSB stuff is they always talk about loss of control. So if you look at that document, I'm not sure, she's probably got it here somewhere. I've got my page split into, there's 10 scenarios on the left and 10 on the right. One is UFIT and one is CFIT. So what is UFIT is uncontrolled flight on the terrain, CFIT is controlled flight on the terrain. The NTSB still to this day gets this wrong because they say the pilot lost control of the airplane. Not true. What is it when you lose control of the airplane? Losing control of the airplane means that you put in an input and the airplane does not respond. Just like her daughter, she tells her to go to the kitchen and get a glass of water, and the daughter says, no, I will not. Well, that's loss of control. You told her what to do, and she said, no, I will not do that. That's loss of control. When you put in an input to the aircraft, it's supposed to respond, no matter what. If you put in an input to go up and the airplane goes down, that's loss of control. If the airplane is fully functioning, flying into the ground at 110 knots, but they flew into the ground, the airplane was still in control. It's just the pilot did not put in the correct controls to keep it from flying into the ground. See the difference there? So whenever you see NTSB say, they died due to loss of control, well, it looks like loss of control because they made a big smoking hole. But they were not loss of control. Everything was still functioning completely perfectly. So the AQP scenarios are designed in 50-50. One half is UFIT, the other half is CFIT. Controlled flight into terrain, the controls were still functioning perfectly. Uncontrolled flight into terrain, the pilot was doing what he thought he should be doing, but the airplane was doing something completely opposite. And there's the difference on that. So that's a big beef I have with NTSB continuously. Almost every report they call it pilot lost control. He did not lose control. The airplane was still controllable. We did not know what the difference was there. So I'd like to do a real quick demonstration if you're good.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to get a volunteer. My blind friend over here is going to come up here with me. Yes, you. Yes. Come on here. And this will only take a second, but I got to demonstrate kind of what AQP is here, and I'm going to have you shoot video for me right here. You okay with that? All right. What? Okay, so the idea here is that I have to be able to show you guys. There you go. Just kind of bring that up on her now. So your name is General Lee. I know you.
Yes, the wing walker from the Flying Circus.
Yes. I know that was you. Okay, how are you?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Good.
Nice to meet you.
First time I'm going back actually. So anyway, she's going to help me demonstrate something real quick because they're going to show you kind of why the scenario thing is important for everything that Meredith is doing on AQP. And she's kind of new to it. She's stepping into this and doing exactly what I want flight schools to do is absorb it, understand it, and start spreading the word. So I appreciate you doing your seminar. But while I'm here, I'm going to show you exactly the whole premise of AQP and everything that we're doing for this. And Jan is going to show us clearly exactly how that whole thing works. Now, did you see it? I'll be able to play this back in slow-mo. Did you see what she did? She flinched. Did you see her facial expression? You flinched and you went back a little bit. It's hard to get Jan to flinch because she's around airplanes, she's a wing walker, so she's used to danger and things, right? But she still flinched because, were you expecting me to do that?
No.
You were not expecting me to do that, were you? Okay, now watch, check this out.
Now that I know.
I'm gonna tell you, in 10 seconds, I'm gonna do the exact same thing. So you look back at the wall, look straight at the wall. In 10 seconds, I'm gonna do the exact same thing, and I want you to watch your facial expression when I do the exact same thing. Ready? So what's the difference?
I was expecting it.
You were expecting it, you knew it was coming. So pilot reactions in time of crisis have a code of confusion there. When the onset of an event occurs, your brain checks out. If you have not trained AQP scenarios, know about them, have rehearsed them, have it all ready to go. I'm sorry, you can have a seat, but thank you very much. Big hand for Jen. That was not pre-arranged. I can take any human being here, any human being, do the exact same thing, and get basically a start or response out of them every time. Never fails. Some people completely launch when you do that. You'll see all kinds of stuff. But, so what we're doing is we're taking AQP, the scenarios that could hurt you, and we're telling you in advance what they are so that you can rehearse them. I'm eliminating the surprise out of it. That's all it is. I didn't invent it. I didn't think it up. I didn't do anything. I just came to understand it and embrace it at the airlines, because the airlines had a problem. They were crashing airplanes. They said, well, how come our guys are keep on crashing airplanes and killing all these people? Well, it's because we are still doing this exact same thing. So why don't we put these guys in the simulator, give them that event, let them practice it until they're like rock solid on it. Then when it happens to them out there on the line, they go, oh, this is scenario number 11. We're good, totally good. No surprise, no hesitation, no loss of brain function, and loss time of useful consciousness. Her amount of time that her brain was not functioning for that few was very small, probably 0.2 seconds, where she was still trying to process what was going on and what just happened and all that stuff. We'll replay it on video. You'll probably be on YouTube here. But you can clearly see the difference. In a crisis in an aircraft, if you got smoke, fire, vibration, something bad going on, your brain can actually check out, and not only can you lose consciousness, your body will actually do the opposite of what you think it's gonna do. You'll actually pull, or you'll push a button, or you'll flip a switch. You'll do something and have no idea that you actually did it. You're not in control of your digits anymore. Your arms, your feet, your inputs to the stick, the pedals, the yoke, the stick, whatever, your body is gonna do what it's gonna do. And that is our entire problem. We are not fixing the problem because the steep turn doesn't do that for us. We can go out and practice the steep turn all day long. It doesn't fix the shock and surprise of the scenario that's going to occur to you when you're up there flying. And that's really all AQP for General Aviation is. Trying to show you what the scenarios are on all the documents and stuff. It's all free, but you'll see it's divided into UFIT and CFIT. And here's all the ones. We can go through them each one at a time. Some of them do not apply to you, like buzzing and low-level acrobatics is a real common one. Some of you guys don't do that stuff. You can say, well, it doesn't apply to me, so you go on. Pick out there's probably 7 or 8 of those that are specifically applicable to you, your airplane, your base, your type of flying, where you go and what you do. They go, well, that one right there, that one will definitely bite me. And I'm definitely gonna be ready. I can tell you, if you're a human being sitting in this room, if you lose an engine on takeoff and you're not ready for it, you're gonna pull. No doubt about it. You're gonna sit there and tell me, I will not. I'm gonna sit here and tell you, you will. Yes, you will. Yes, you will. And if you're climbing out at VX, your VX and your VS1 are about the same number. If you're climbing out at VX and you lose an engine and you pull even a little bit, you're gonna go below VX and you're gonna come right through VS1 and your wing is gonna shake. And what comes after a stall is a spin, and then I show up on the scene with my video camera and say, here's where this guy died, right here. Here's what he did. His airplane ended up vertical, with the tail still in the air. This is the stall spin. He lost an engine, he pulled, and he would have sat here in this room and told me, I will not pull in time of crisis. I'm gonna tell you, you will. Oh yes, you will. So that's my 6-minute version of what she's trying to do here, and I appreciate your opportunity to jump in here. But the documentation has all those scenarios. Just becomes familiar with the specific scenarios for you and your type of flying. We should be good.
Thanks, Dan.
Back to you, Meredith. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And so, again, what we want you all to do is think about your airplane, your flight school, your particular situation, and try and incorporate this into your student pilot training, incorporate this into your next flight review, or just, even if you just had a flight review, go out and grab an instructor. And a lot of this stuff, honestly, I tell folks, you can practice safely by yourself or with a buddy, okay? So you don't have to do like some sort of official flight review to practice some of this stuff. For example, the scenario Dan was just talking about where, you're gonna pull and that's gonna get you hurt. And we do this with our student pilots and with anybody who wants to rent the airplane. Say, okay, let's just depart. We'll go through all our briefing and everything, but let's just depart. Let's climb out of the traffic pattern. Let's just go somewhere safe, right, where you're gonna do your maneuvers and do this. Get the airplane climbing and be wide. Pretend like you just took off, right? So, la 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 la, here we go, we're climbing. And again, you can totally safely do this on your own. Pull the throttle to idle and just practice doing this, right? It's just the muscle memory, it's the repetition of, okay, I'm expecting it, here it comes, this is what I'm gonna do. Then you can maybe get with a friend or, fellow pilot, or get with a flight instructor and have them sort of try and sneak it in on you, right? And we do this with our students and stuff all the time. You're just kind of like, la 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 la, and all of a sudden just, pull the throttle and, see what happens, see what they do. See if their muscle memory has been trained to do the right thing. My mentor, when I was working on my certificates and ratings, wonderful flight instructor, he's now one of the VPs at Cirrus, he said, you gotta be spring-loaded to react. You just have to train your body, train your mind to just do the right thing. And this is just part of practice, right? It's not good enough to just think about it, we have to practice doing it. At our location where we're at in Jacksonville, we have a couple good options for actually practicing loss of thrust on takeoff. What happens if the engine quits at 200 feet? Well, it's obviously not reasonable if you're at a 2,000-foot strip, right, to practice landing straight ahead in the trees. Clearly we can't do that for real, right? But you can go to a big airport, like we have Cecil Field, which is on the west side of Jacksonville. Their longest runway is 10,000 feet. I mean, I can land on that thing 3 times in my Cessna 150, right? It's huge. They've got the military jets coming in there. So, and the controllers there are totally cool about it. I just asked them, I'd like a clearance to take off and immediately a clearance to land. Because I don't want to give it away to the student, what I'm actually doing. And I've talked to the tower over there. They're like, okay, cleared to take off, 3-6 right, and cleared to land. Like in the same sentence. So they know what I'm gonna do. Let the student take off in about 200 feet, pull the throttle to idle, and say, okay, land, right? So they can actually see the visual of what does this look like, right? What does my airplane look like in this situation, and how do I make this happen, right? So just some creative ideas that maybe you can consider safely practicing at altitude or at a huge airport if you have the ability in your airplane to maybe make your practice a little more meaningful. Questions, comments? Somebody's got to have something. Yesterday everybody was very chatty. Yes?
Would Dan give an illustration of U-fit into a mountain? Like C-fit, you're at Denver, 8,000 feet flying west, you just fly in the mountains. What would be a U-fit example of the same thing? You fly into the mountains, but what would be a U-fit?
Well, in order to enter a U-fit, you have to have lost control of the aircraft. That can only be mechanical or stall, one of the two. So it doesn't really matter if you're over the mountains or over the ocean. If you stall your airplane over the mountains, you're going to crash into the mountain. The mountain had nothing to do with the fact that you stalled your airplane, let it get slow up high, and your result was that you crashed into it. And I think the SB is going to show up and say that the guy lost control of his airplane. Well, yes, uncontrolled flight, that would be true. He lost control of his airplane. If he simply didn't see the mountain and flew directly into the face of the mountain, they're still going to say that the guy lost control of his airplane. Not true. He was in full control of the airplane. The airplane was fully responsive and fully able to not fly on the mountain. He just didn't know that the mountain was there. So.
And I think a better way to frame it, right, is the pilot lost control of himself.
Yeah.
It's not they lost control of the airplane, you lost control of yourself, of your own process, of your reaction, of your situational awareness, right? We've all heard that phrase over and over again. And again, just some other ideas throwing out there of stuff that we do in the flight school that I've done with students. Make it fun, right? If you're on a trip. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. So on a lot of training that I've done, when it's your mid-flights, your full cruise,
Sure.
you lose an engine, right?
Uh-huh.
You're full and you're looking for and all that. One thing I started doing, untold, and some instructors say, I hadn't thought about that. Some say, I don't like it. But at full, when they pull it, I go nose up until I hit best glide. In my thought process is I'm trading altitude for airspeed until I hit it. So it gives me maybe 150, 200 feet, but I thought, why not? I haven't heard someone say, I've heard people say I don't like it, the instructor, but I don't get a rationale for it, and I'm wondering if you have an opinion on that.
So I can tell you I actually did that once, for real. Fortunately, my engine didn't quit, but I was ferrying a Cessna 182 from a little airport in Annapolis, Maryland, back to our home airport after maintenance, and I had just taken off, and that's right underneath the Baltimore Bravo. We had to stay clear inside the SFR, right? And so I took off. I was at like maybe, I don't know, 800 feet or something, and the oil pressure gauge went whoosh. And the first thing I did was look up. And the engine kept running, right? But I saw that gauge go like that. First thing I did was look up. I'm like, okay, Southwest Airlines is not on final above me. I pulled up into the Bravo and I said, Potomac approach, I'm in the Bravo, my engine might quit. That's exactly what I said. And they're like, okay, what can we do for you, right? And they said, are you declaring emergency? I said, stand by, right? So I looked, everything looks fine, tapped on the gauge, engine's running, temp is good. I said, nope, I don't believe I have an emergency at this time, but I need as high as altitude as possible, so I can continue to my home base. Everything looks stable for now, but I'll let you know. So to relate to your scenario and to answer your question, would I do that if the motor actually quit? What we advise, which I think accomplishes the same goal and gives the pilot a little, buys you a little time and reduces workload. And this works, I found, in most single engine airplanes. I won't say all, because I haven't flown all, but certainly in any of my 7 Cessnas. If you take that trim wheel and you just scroll it all the way nose up and let go, you'll end up within a couple knots or miles per hour of your best glide every single time.
Really?
Try it. So that way you can you don't have to really think about what to do. You can just, what we tell folks is just park the nose on the horizon and start spinning the wheel of fortune while you're looking for aiming toward your best glide spot. Yeah.
The FAA has an advice on how to determine the best lift to drag ratio for an airplane that does not give it to you in the POH, and they put it at halfway between VX and VY.
Yep. So this is the kind of thing, definitely, again, you should try. You can try safely at altitude and just, see what your airplane actually does. But I'm on board in concept with what you're doing. My only comment to that would be, you don't want someone going wonk and stalling, trying to get there.
Understood. That's why I'm just to best glide. That's one thing.
And
On takeoff, I think his point, you've got to push forward if your VX taking off like that. That's at full cruise though.
You're talking about in cruise.
Yeah.
Right.
So, anyway, thank you for.
Yeah,
Okay.
and just to kind of close the loop on that, I think it's so important for all pilots to have a good, solid understanding of the pitch attitudes correlating to the airspeeds in their airplane in different configurations. Not staring at that airspeed indicator, but if you're visual, right? Okay, top of my instrument panel lined up with the horizon, or whatever it is in your airplane, right? Be able to replicate that picture if you're VFR. And if you're IFR, know the degrees nose up. And just go there, right? Park it there and then trim and then get to your checklist. But just get the airplane in that go-to location, right, of pitch attitude. That way you can relieve your workload and move on to actually dealing with the situation. Yeah.
It would depend a lot on if you had a high drag airplane. I would think that would be a bad idea in a high drag airplane.
Yeah, and again, in our, we had a Quicksilver. If you're talking about that kind of airplane, yeah, totally different ballgame. That's why I'm saying, the trim nose up and let go works great in a Cessna, or like I've done it in a, you know, like a Piper Warrior or something like that. But yeah, in some sort of like ultralight or LSA,
No.
they have different behavior, right? So you would have to come up with, but with that said, you would want to know what to do in your airplane to reduce your workload quickly, whatever that is for you.
Mine is.
Right, yeah, I know, it's the same thing. I understand what you're saying.
What
Yes, sir.
about the non-impossible turn, where you have probably enough altitude to make that 180 back to the runway?
Mhm.
But do you turn into the wind and give you a better angle rather than do an immediate 180 and then over on the side where you can't make a decent straight-in landing back in an emergency?
This needs to be part of your takeoff briefing, right? And this is, again, on our pre-solo. You have to know what the best scenario is for your location and for your airplane, right? Now, I know, and again, I'm not advocating you immediately go out and try this, but I'm saying you should go practice at a safe altitude. Something any pilot can do completely safely at altitude. Get yourself a straight line somewhere. It's a road, the beach, the runway, whatever it is, right? And like I said, get yourself climbing at VY or, you know, in your airplane over this line. Pull your throttle tile, and not only the push, but the turn, right? And if you practice this enough, like, and of course it depends on loading, it depends on a lot of other things, right?
Buildings, trees.
Yeah, but in general, oh, is that the 5-minute warning? Oh, I love it. That person didn't come in yesterday, maybe it was a
Maybe you take too long yesterday.
maybe it took too long. You can totally practice that at a safe altitude and see what's the best that you can get in your airplane. And again, just practice it. Yes, sir?
A question, how do you mitigate damage for your engine or your aircraft if you have like a turbo or something, and you don't want to shock cool it or do that stick on it? Just
I mean, again, you've got to weigh the pros and cons here. Obviously, you don't want to go wonk and wreck your engine, right? But as smoothly as you can. I mean, obviously, at some point, you have to pull the throttle back to land your airplane, right? So as gently as you feel comfortable, you can still practice that, and you're not going to be hanging out in that glide forever, right? So I think the cost benefit would definitely weigh on safely finding a way to manage your engine temps and practice it. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Yes?
You know, a few sailplane lessons would help immensely.
Oh my gosh, that's on my bucket list. There's a glider club in Prolong. I haven't done that yet.
What you do, keep your nose down, keep your feet up.
Yes.
Right. Yep.
Where you going?
Hey, Jim, if you want to do the route.
Yeah. All right, let's, thank you so much for the reminder. Did anybody not get a raffle ticket, real quick? What are these two sitting up here? Were these,
Don't know.
okay, we'll just leave those to the side. All right, we're gonna be, raffling off a water bottle, a mug,
I'll give it to you.
And Dan's DC3?
and Dan's got some hats for sale. And then we will get out of everybody's way here. Let me start unplugging.
Dan, I got a question. Do you have, like you were saying, like,
You are welcome.
show back here, do you have a small summer between the air and the aircraft? We live on high in the back.